Until today, at least. This morning, we heard reports that President Trump had talked to the North Korean leader for the first time on the phone, but the White House was quick to correct that. For more, let's connect to our Ji-won on the line for us. So, Ji-won, please walk us through exactly what happened here.
Mark, it was mistakenly reported that President Trump had direct talks with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, as Trump smilingly answered yes to a reporter who asked if he had spoken directly with Kim. Now, that would have been a major development if it were true, but White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders soon clarified that the talks were not with Kim directly. Now, what we do know is that the U.S. did engage in direct talks with the North at extremely high levels, according to President Trump on Tuesday, as he held his first day of two-day summit with the Japanese Prime Minister Abe at the President's Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida. But he did not specify which senior officials from Washington and Pyongyang have talked.
Well, Ji-won, on that point, we are hearing that Trump's pick for his next Secretary of State and current CIA Chief Mike Pompeo recently visited Pyongyang, and not only that, met face-to-face with Kim Jong-un.
Yes, Mark, the Washington Post reported just a few minutes ago, citing two people with direct knowledge of the trip. The report says CIA Director Mike Pompeo went to Pyongyang over the Easter weekend to meet Kim Jong-un as Trump's envoy. The Easter weekend was from March 31st to April 1st, not long after Pompeo had been nominated for Secretary of State. Now, this would make him one of the most senior officials known to have visited Pyongyang in recent years, following the nation's intelligence chief James Clapper in 2014. Now, the CIA has been in direct contact with the North in recent weeks. Multiple sources, including CNN and Reuters, reported that CIA and State Department officials are communicating with the North through back channels to plan for the highly anticipated summit to be held in late May or early June. Now, that's all from me for now, but I'll be back with more updates in our later newscast. Mark?
Well, thank you very much, Ji-won, for that report. Fascinating stuff. It really does look like this US-North Korea summit is going to happen. Now, as a follow-up to that report, as Ji-won briefly mentioned, the leaders of the United States and Japan are meeting at President Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida to discuss a range of issues, but mostly trade and, of course, North Korea. The summit comes amid fears in Tokyo that Japan could be sidelined from the latest nuclear negotiations. Our Kim Hyo-sun tells us more.
North Korea is definitely a major agenda for President Trump and Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. President Trump said Seoul and Pyongyang are discussing to formally end the decades-long Korean War, adding that such conversations have his blessing. As Trump prepares for his summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, he also told Abe that North Korea is coming along and that the meeting will take place probably in early June or a little before that.
We will probably be, depending on the various meetings and conversations, we'll be having meetings with Kim Jong-un very soon. That'll be taking place probably in early June or a little before that, assuming things go well. It's possible things won't go well and we won't have the meetings, and we'll just continue to go along this very strong path that we've taken. But we will see what happens.
President Trump also explained that 5 locations are under consideration for the scheduled Washington-Pyongyang summit. Trade is also a massive topic between the two leaders, with Tokyo being one of the few American allies that has not been exempted from President Trump's new steel and aluminum tariffs. The White House added earlier that Trump and Abe will explore ways to expand fair and reciprocal trade and investment ties between the two allies, which are also two of the world's wealthiest and most innovative economies. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
The White House says the release of 3 Americans detained in North Korea will be one of the key agendas for the upcoming US-North Korea summit. Senior Director for Asian Affairs at the US National Security Council, Matthew Pottinger, made the comments to reporters on Tuesday. The American detainees are Kim Sang-dok, also known as Tony Kim, Kim Hak-song and Kim Dong-chul. They are being held on charges of espionage and other undisclosed crimes. With just over 1 week to go until the leaders of the two Koreas meet, hopes are rising by the day that the talks could genuinely usher in a new era of peace. On Tuesday, President Moon Jae-in's chief of staff and chair of the Summit Preparation Committee updated the public on the progress made thus far. Moon Gon-young reports.
If need be, South Korea's key security officials could visit Pyongyang for more high-level talks ahead of the 2018 Inter-Korean Summit now only 9 days away. That's according to South Korean President Moon Jae-in's chief of staff and chair of the Summit Preparation Committee, as President Moon looks to draw reaffirmation from North Korean leader Kim Jong-un his commitment to denuclearize during their historic meeting next Friday.
The possibility of National Intelligence Service Director Seo Hoon or Chung Yi-yong, the chief of the National Security Office, visiting Pyongyang remains an option in the course of preparing for the summit.
The two officials traveled to the North Korean capital as the South Korean president's special envoys in early March, where they met for the very first time North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, who offered to meet the South Korean leader and U.S. President Donald Trump to discuss his regime's denuclearization. The summit meeting between Moon and Kim are set for April 27th on the South Korean side of the border village of Panmunjom, while Trump has said he'll meet with Kim by early June at the latest.
We believe the nature of the 2018 Inter-Korean Summit will be important in that it will be followed by a North Korea-U.S. summit and quite possibly lead to a three-way summit between South Korea, North Korea, and the United States.
Im said Seoul and Pyongyang are currently in the course of discussing the wording of a possible joint statement to be released at the end of the summit. He added it will likely focus on issues of denuclearization and peace on the Korean peninsula and an improvement in relations not only between the two Koreas, but also with other countries, including the U.S. Meanwhile, working-level officials from the two Koreas in security protocol and media coverage meet for their second meeting on the North Korean side of the border village on Panmunjom on Wednesday, during which the two sides will discuss whether they'll broadcast live the two leaders' meeting, hold a joint news conference, and whether North Korea's First Lady Ri Sol-ju will accompany her husband. Moon Gon-young, Arirang News, The Blue House.
So we're just several days away from seeing the leaders of South and North Korea meet for a summit for the first time in more than a decade. And as such, officials from the two sides are finalising arrangements this week, as we just heard there in that report. Another working-level meeting will take place today at the Tongil-gak, a North Korean building that straddles the inter-Korean border. The two sides will discuss issues, as we heard, of security protocol and media coverage. And following today's talks, it's highly likely we will learn more about the time of the summit and the formality of the talks set for April 27th. South Korea's government officials have been pouring all their efforts into ensuring the success of the Inter-Korean Summit. But how does the general public feel about the rapid diplomatic developments taking place right here on the Korean peninsula? Our Park Hee-jun hit the streets of Seoul to find out.
The much-anticipated summit is now just over a week away, and the South Korean government is welcoming the renewed dialogue between the two Koreas. But what about the South Korean public? According to a survey by the Korea Society Opinion Institute conducted between March 16th and 17th, a majority of South Koreans favored holding the Inter-Korean Summit. And when asked whether the talks would be productive, more than half of them said yes.
I think it's great that the two Koreas are holding the summit. I'm hoping that South and North Korea will unite someday, and the renewed exchange will have a positive impact.
Watching the two countries interact after a long standstill makes me feel like things are beginning to clear up.
I'm very much in favor of the Inter-Korean Summit. Regardless of whether or not there is a favorable outcome, embracing them will someday lead to unification. I support the government for making such an effort to resume the talks.
South Koreans generally appear to have positive opinions on holding the Inter-Korean Summit, but on whether the talks will have the desired outcome of bringing North Korea to denuclearize, they're not so sure. In a survey of over 1,000 respondents by Gallup Korea from March 13th to March 15th, more than half the respondents said they think North Korea will not give up its nuclear weapons. Only 22% said it will eventually.
I believe there's a very low chance of North Korea denuclearizing. The Kim Jong-un regime knows very well that it cannot exist without nuclear weapons. I think we should take this opportunity to identify North Korea's nuclear capabilities.
It's hard to know for sure, but I'm skeptical about whether North Korea will change its attitude, which is why I'm not so supportive of the inter-Korean summit.
And aside from denuclearization, people also wished for the talks to lead to further discussions on other important issues, including restarting the Kaesong Industrial Complex and Kumgangsan mountain tours. But a more urgent issue for the public is conducting reunions for separated families, as it's a matter where time is of the essence. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
Now, North Korea's top diplomat Ri Yong-ho has returned home after an exhaustive diplomatic tour that saw him spend roughly 2 weeks on the road, traveling to China, Russia, and a handful of former Soviet states. During his trip, Pyongyang's foreign minister attended a non-aligned movement ministerial meeting in Azerbaijan and sat down with senior officials and counterparts from China, Russia, and Tajikistan. Watchers see Ri's multi-nation trip as part of Pyongyang's efforts to garner support from the international community ahead of its respective summits with South Korea and the United States. Now, let's take a look at the rest of the day's news. The International Monetary Fund is maintaining its earlier 3% growth forecast for South Korea for 2018. The outlook is in line with the Bank of Korea's growth outlook for this year as well. Lee Seung-jae reports.
The International Monetary Fund is forecasting that the global economy will continue to strengthen despite an overall decline in global stock markets and the simmering trade tensions between the U.S. and China. The IMF also says it's maintaining its 3% growth forecast for South Korea this year. This matches the 3% growth forecast by the Bank of Korea last week, despite mixed signs facing the export-driven economy. In addition, the IMF's World Economic Outlook forecasts 2.9% growth for 2019 and a slight downward trend of 0.1% each year for the next few years. This comes as the nation's economy grew 3.1% last year, accelerating from the previous year's 2.8% growth on the back of robust exports and a recovery in private spending. Meanwhile, the global economy as a whole is expected to expand 3.9% in 2018, unchanged from its earlier forecast, with the IMF also predicting the same level of growth for the following year. The growth forecast is the fastest pace since 2011, with every major economy expected to grow for a second year in a row, supported by strong momentum, favorable market sentiment, accommodative financial conditions, and the domestic and international repercussions of expansionary fiscal policy in the U.S. Despite the rosy outlook, the IMF warned that rising U.S.-China trade tensions threatened to damage the steady global growth picture, but added there was still time for the world's two largest economies to step back from the brink. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Now, new data shows the number of long-term unemployed here in South Korea hit a record high in the first quarter of this year. Statistics Korea says the number of people looking for work for more than 6 months passed 150,000. That is up more than 18% from a year earlier. The figure is also the highest since related data was first compiled in the year 2000. It means there are now more long-term unemployed in the country than there were during the height of the global financial crisis. Back then, in 2008 to 2009, it was around 80,000, so it's almost double now. According to the data, Koreans in their 20s are suffering the most from long-term unemployment. South Korea's Prime Minister has highlighted the need to thoroughly manage key risks facing the country in the second year of the Moon Jae-in administration. And with the June elections quickly approaching and key posts up for grabs, Lee Na-kyun also called on local governments to prevent a vacuum in administrative affairs. Our political correspondent Kim Min-ji with the details.
The Korean government is urging officials to carefully manage the various risks the nation is facing at home and abroad to make sure they don't get out of hand. At a cabinet meeting on Tuesday, Prime Minister Lee Na-kyun said that the government has set out specific areas that need to be watched and managed by relevant ministries during the second year of the Moon Jae-in administration. Last year, when the Moon administration began, it set out 50 such areas. The Prime Minister cited, for instance, the recent waste chaos in the country, where recycling collectors refused to take plastic bags and plastic bottles after China decided to stop importing waste from other countries. He said it's an example of what happens when action is not taken at the right time.
China made its decision after we set our policy risks. It would have been good if we had then added the waste issue to our list and taken care of it. At the time, we were unable to assess what impact it would have on us. It's a globalized era now, and it's not just economic decisions that have an impact locally. Natural or social disasters can affect us too. Each ministry needs to thoroughly study these external factors.
And with local elections now less than 2 months away, the Prime Minister called on local governments to come up with measures to avoid a vacuum in administrative affairs when positions change hands. He said there are concerns that important policies or projects could be cancelled or put on hold until after the elections.
Local governments mainly carry out work that's directly related to people's lives. So if there is a snag in operations, the damage done is to the people's livelihoods. Especially when it comes to jobs policies or support for regions hit by corporate restructuring, things that need to be handled quickly, the blow will be even greater.
The Prime Minister called on relevant ministries to keep close tabs on local governments so they can smoothly carry out important policies and prevent any operational slip-ups. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now, for a look at stories making headlines around the world, and we start with some breaking news. Former U.S. First Lady Barbara Bush has died at the age of 92. For more on this and other international news, let's turn to our No Adam. So, Adam, Mrs. Bush had been ill for some time. Do we know exactly how she passed away?
Well, Mark, the immediate cause was not revealed, but she was reportedly suffering from congestive heart failure, which worsened in recent days. The Bush family released a statement saying that she had refused to receive further medical treatment. She instead opted to spend her last days in so-called comfort care with her family. Mrs. Bush was only the second woman in American history after Abigail Adams to have had a husband and a son elected president. She and her husband, George H.W. Bush, were also married 73 years, which is longer than any other presidential couple in U.S. history. Through a statement, her son and 43rd U.S. President, George W. Bush, described her as a fabulous First Lady and a woman unlike any other who brought levity, love and literacy to millions. Mrs. Bush was well known for her plain-spoken manner and signature white hair and pearl necklaces and earrings. She was a potent defender of her husband and son while they were serving in office. She also set up the Barbara Bush Foundation to fight illiteracy. One passenger aboard a Southwest Airlines plane has been killed after the jet had to make an emergency landing on Tuesday. The Boeing 737 was heading from New York to Dallas with 149 people on board, but an apparent engine failure forced an emergency landing in Philadelphia. 7 others are being treated for minor injuries. Survivors say shrapnel from the damaged engine blew open a window. A woman sitting nearby was said to have been seriously injured as she was sucked toward the opening, but luckily was pulled back inside by fellow passengers. Survivors also praised the pilot for regaining control of what would have been a steep downward fall. The NTSB is on the scene to investigate the exact cause of the incident. Starbucks is to close more than 8,000 stores across the United States for one afternoon next month to educate workers on what it called racial bias. The training session will be provided on May 29th to about 175,000 employees. It comes as the coffee shop giant tries to cool tensions after the arrests of 2 black men at one of its stores in Philadelphia last week, which sparked accusations of racial profiling. In a statement Tuesday, Starbucks CEO Kevin Johnson said he and his leadership team spent the past few days in Philadelphia to get feedback from the community and work out a solution. Protesters have called for a boycott of the company in what has become the biggest PR test yet for the CEO, who took the helm of the company about a year ago. There are conflicting reports on whether or not experts from the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons have entered the site of a suspected chemical attack in Syria. Syrian state media reported they entered Douma on Tuesday along with the country's health minister. But U.S. State Department spokeswoman Heather Nauert said the delegation had not yet entered Douma. The OPCW team arrived in Damascus on Saturday and was reportedly blocked access to the suspected attack site by Syrian and Russian authorities. The Russian military said the team could enter on Wednesday to carry out its probe aimed at seeing which chemicals, if any, were used. Syria and Russia deny any poison gas attack took place.
Good morning. We are expecting a repeat of Tuesday's weather in Korea, and over the East Sea, Tokyo will see some light rain in the morning. Dust levels, however, will rise again, unfortunately. Southern regions will have high levels of dust all day, while the capital area will see relatively bad levels in the morning. So check the dust levels before going for an afternoon stroll today, and Seoul will get up to 20 degrees Celsius, while Daegu and Gyeongju will make it to 23 degrees under mostly sunny skies. So strong UV rays are expected. Apply plenty of sunblock and wear sunglasses to protect yourself from the strong sunshine. With that, let's take a look at the international weather for viewers around the world. So most of South Korea will have sunny skies along with high UV rays today. Most of North Korea will have a repeat of Tuesday's weather conditions. And as for the rest of Asia, those in New Delhi are going through a severe heat wave with highs hovering around 40 degrees Celsius and expect another scorcher today. Meanwhile, Melbourne shivered through the coldest April night in 6 years at just over 6 degrees during the night, but highs will rise to 23 degrees Celsius. And heading to North America, there will likely be more snow on Wednesday in Chicago, but this could be the last of it. And as for South America, most cities will have a repeat of Tuesday's weather conditions. Taking you to Europe, London could be one of the warmest places in Europe this week, with forecasters predicting possible temperatures of 27 degrees on Thursday. Lastly, to Africa, the heat wave in Cairo will hit its peak with an expected high of 36 degrees Celsius. And that's all the weather update for now.
Well, that's where we're going to leave the news for now. Our next bulletin is coming up at noon Korea time. So until then, goodbye.
Year 2000, the first inter-Korean summit.